Who will be examining the witness?
I will be, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Blake, who will your next witness be?
Detective Nathan Moffatt.
All right, thank you. All right, Detective Moffatt, before we get started, I just wanted to inquire, have you in any way viewed any of the trial testimony while this case has been proceeding?
No, sir.
All right, not through any internet viewing, reading anywhere, watching any videos of the trial?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you for your response. I'll just let you know while you're on the stand, of course, we're making a record of the proceedings with the court reporter, so please answer all questions verbally. Also try to avoid speaking at the same time as anyone that's asking you a question so the record stays clear. With those rules in mind then, Ms. Blake, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Sergeant Nathan Moffatt, M-O-F as in Frank, F as in Frank, A, T as in Tom.
Where are you currently employed?
The Chandler Police Department in Arizona.
How long have you been employed with them?
I've been with Chandler Police Department for about 21 years.
And your current title is Sergeant?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you held other positions within the department?
I have.
And what are some of those positions?
So I spent, obviously, started as an officer with a previous agency, but when I came to Chandler, I spent about 5 years on patrol, and then I went to criminal investigations as a detective where I was there for about 14 and a half years prior to getting promoted to sergeant.
Do you have any specialized training in order to be a law enforcement officer?
Yes. In 1999, I attended the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy and graduated and became a sworn police officer.
And since then, have you attended additional training as a detective?
I have.
Were you working on July 11th of 2019?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall responding to the report of a shooting?
I did. Yeah, I do.
Your Honor, I'm going to just make sure the record's clear. I've objected to this witness previously under Rule 404B of the Idaho Rules of Evidence that anything that happened in Arizona is not relevant for this proceeding in Idaho.
All right, thank you, Mr. Archibald. The court notes the continuing objection to evidence relating to what occurred in Arizona. The court previously made a ruling on that issue in February, and for the reasons incorporated in that ruling, I'll overrule this objection, noting the jurors have been previously also instructed about the limiting nature of this evidence and will be instructed also before their deliberations with an explicit instruction describing how this evidence could be considered. So with that, the objection's overruled, and Ms. Blake, you can continue with your examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Moffatt, are you aware of who reported that shooting?
Yeah, a 911 call came in from the residence from Alexander or Alex Cox.
Do you recall where you responded to?
Yeah, it was 5531. The street numbers or the streets escaping me.
South Four Peaks Drive?
Yes, South Four Peaks Drive. I'm sorry.
And that was in Chandler, Arizona?
Yes, ma'am.
When you arrived on scene, were other officers already present?
Yeah, patrol officers were already on scene when I arrived there.
And is that fairly common to have patrol officers there before detectives?
Yeah, very common.
When you arrived, did you take on a specific role with regards to the investigation?
Yeah, I was assigned role as the case agent.
And is that common practice?
Yes, yeah. On every case like this, we have a case agent and a scene agent.
As the case agent, did you walk through the scene?
I did. I was briefly briefed by patrol, for their initial investigation or their initial interviews, kind of what they had at the time. I briefly walked through the scene and then I responded back to the station.
When you were on scene, do you recall seeing Miss Vallow or Lori Vallow present?
I did not see Lori present.
Did you see Alex Cox present?
I did.
Did you speak with him on scene?
I did not.
Did you observe Charles Vallow?
I did.
And what did you observe about Charles Vallow?
When I briefly walked into the residence, Charles was deceased on the living room floor.
Did you end up conducting an interview with Alex Cox?
I did, yeah, back at our station.
Is that common to interview individuals back at the station?
Yes,
Did Alex, in fact, participate in the interview?
he did.
Did Alex tell you why he was there that morning?
Yeah, in his interview, he told me that he had spent the night at Lori's house because they planned on doing something the next day.
So he would have spent the night of the 10th?
Yes, the 10th into the 11th. Yes, ma'am.
And did he tell you what happened with regard to Charles getting shot?
Yeah, when we started talking about it, he said that Charles and Lori were in an argument inside the house, and he was back in a bedroom, and he could hear Lori and Charles arguing, and Lori came into his room, and he basically said he intervened between Lori and Charles.
Did he indicate if he knew what the fight or what the disagreement was about?
No, he just said they were arguing.
Did he indicate that he ever saw Charles put hands on Lori?
No.
And did he indicate that he did not see that?
Yeah, he indicated they did not get physical. He never saw it get physical. It was just an argument with Charles following Lori through the house.
Did he say anything about Tylee?
Yeah, he said that when the argument had worked its way into the bedroom where he was at, Lori basically circled around behind him, and he got between Lori and Charles. And he said that Lori came back around him and made her way into the living room or into the kitchen. The living room and the kitchen were divided by a wall, and that at that point in time, Tylee came out of her room when Lori was back in the kitchen.
Did he tell you why or how he ended up shooting Charles?
Yeah, he said that when Tylee came out of her bedroom, Tylee came out of the bedroom with a bat and was basically trying to protect what he was saying is protect her mother, and that at one point in time, Tylee took the bat and kind of poked it out at him. He said at that time, Charles took the bat, and then there was an argument over the bat, and at some point in time, he said he got struck. He, being Alex, got struck by Charles with the bat in the back of his head.
So he described Tylee as having the bat towards Charles pointed out at him?
Yeah, he kind of demonstrated poking it out towards him.
And that Charles had then grabbed a hold of the bat from Tylee?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you observe any injury to Alex consistent with being hit with a baseball bat?
I observed a small laceration on the back of his head. It was a laceration, but it wasn't consistent with being hit extremely hard in the back of the head with a baseball bat by an athletic man.
And have you responded out to battery cases where people have been hit by objects?
Yes, ma'am.
Was it consistent with what you've seen before?
Not with a violent strike.
What did Alex indicate he had done after he shot Charles?
So Alex basically says that the argument happens, he gets hit in the head with a bat, and he goes back to his room and retrieves a gun. And that he came back out into the living room to confront Charles because he was still in the house with the bat. Alex says he told Charles to drop the bat. Charles said, "What are you going to do about it?" And at that point, Alex says he came at him, and then Charles shot him.
You said Charles shot him. Did you
I'm
mean?
sorry, Alex shot Charles.
And Alex claims Charles came at Alex.
Yes.
And at that point, did Alex tell you how many times he had shot Charles?
He said he was not sure, but he said it was more than once.
Did he tell you where he thought he had shot him on Charles' person?
Yeah, he said center mass, so the torso area.
Did you ultimately determine that Charles had been shot center mass?
Yes, Charles had 2 gunshot wounds, one to the chest, one to the lower abdomen.
And after Alex had shot Charles, did he tell you what he then did?
Yeah, after he shot Charles, he said he walked into the kitchen, washed his hands, because he said he had blood on his hands from his head, and then walked back into his bedroom, set the gun down, and then called 911.
Did he tell you anything about where Lori and Tylee were when he shot Charles?
He said he didn't know. He didn't know where they were at.
Did he indicate that they were in the room with him?
I asked a couple different ways, and he just said, I don't know where they were at at the time of the shooting.
Did Alex indicate anything to you with regard to performing life-saving measures?
I asked if he performed CPR, because when he called 911, they asked him to, and he said he had.
Did you ask Alex if he was there to help Lori?
I did. So when I was conducting my interview with Alex, we took a break for a minute. I stepped out because Detective Inclin was interviewing Lori and Tylee, and when I talked quickly to Detective Inclin, who said that Lori asked Alex to stay the night at the house because he was there because she wanted him to be there to protect him from Charles. And so I went back in and asked Alex, actually on more than one occasion, if he had been there, in fact, to protect Lori from Charles, and he adamantly said no. He said multiple times that's not the case.
But Lori had indicated that he had stayed there to protect her.
Yeah, according to Detective Inclin, that's what Lori said.
Did you ask Alex if he had called anyone else before he called 911?
I did. When I was briefed by Detective Inclin about what her interviews kind of had revealed, she told me that Lori told her.
I'm going to object, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Sustained.
Is it common that as the case agent you speak with other detectives?
Yes.
And do you speak with other detectives about the portions of the investigation that they are conducting?
Yes.
And did you in fact speak with Detective Inclin regarding what she had learned from an interview with Ms. Vallow?
I did.
Based on what she had learned from the interview, did you ask Alex whether or not he had called anyone?
I did.
And what did he tell you?
He said he had not.
Was it your understanding that that was inconsistent with what Lori had stated?
It was.
I'll object. The only way he can answer that is based upon hearsay.
And Your Honor, it's not being offered for the truth of the matter.
If it's not the truth, then it's not relevant.
I'll sustain the objection.
Did you at some point make additional observations of the scene?
I did.
And did you specifically make observations regarding the scene where Charles was found?
I did, yes.
What observations did you make?
When we were back at the house after we completed our interviews, Detective Coons was processing the scene. I was present while they were processing the scene for evidence. We learned that there was in fact 2 gunshot wounds to Charles. One of the wounds, the exit or the trajectory was down, and we pulled that projectile.
And I'm going to object, Your Honor. This testimony is based upon hearsay. He learned it from someone else.
Your Honor, I believe he's talking about his observations of the scene. I think there were other detectives there that he's referencing, if I could clarify that.
If you'll clarify, I didn't see the hearsay in that. Go ahead and clarify, Ms. Blake, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Detective Moffatt, did you go back and make observations at the scene?
Yes, I did.
And were there other detectives present when you were making the observations?
There were.
And so I think you were talking about looking at the exit wound.
Yeah, so
tell us what you observed.
We were looking at basically the evidence at the residence. As I was saying, there was one bullet strike that landed in the baseboard. And then there was another bullet strike under Charles's body.
And did you notice bullet strikes anywhere else in the residence?
No, besides those 2, there were none.
The bullet strike under his body, did that lead you to believe anything regarding the position of Charles' body when he was shot?
Yeah, the bullets.
I'll object, Your Honor. Speculation.
Your Honor, I think he can answer what he believed.
I think a little additional foundation would be necessary in regards to training before he could give that opinion.
How
So
long?
sustain the objection on those grounds for now.
How long were you a homicide detective?
I did 11 and a half years in homicide and 3 years in family crimes before that.
Have you responded out to gunshots before?
Yes, several.
Have you observed bodies that have been shot before?
Several.
Have you done trainings on bullet wounds, things of that nature?
I have. I'm currently assigned to the executive board of directors for the Arizona Homicide Investigators Association. Have been for 11 years. We conduct about 100 hours of training a year. So I have hundreds and hundreds of hours of training in homicide and related items.
And based on your training and experience, based on that mark in the floor, where did you believe Charles' body was when he was shot?
Yeah, my observations from where Charles was shot, especially when we rolled him and saw the strike underneath him, is the wound to his abdomen was what is called a short gunshot wound. So the wound to his abdomen traveled through his abdomen and out of his shoulder and was consistent with Charles being flat on the floor when that projectile exited his body out of his shoulder.
And was that consistent with what Alex Cox reported?
It was not.
Were you involved in transporting Lori Vallow back to the residence?
I was.
Did you make observations of Lori on the way back?
Yes, I did.
And what were those?
I'll object, Your Honor. Relevance.
That's overruled.
So Detective Inklin and I transported Tylee, Lori, and Alex back from the station to the residence while we were still processing the scene, so they could get a car and go somewhere else, or stay on scene outside of the scene, or stay at the residence outside of the scene. So Detective Inklin was driving. Tylee was in the front seat. We were in a minivan, so I was in the far back of the minivan, and Lori and Alex were sitting basically in the middle row. The ride back from the station was bizarre, to say the least. It was very lighthearted, very just conversationalist. It was, like I said, it was very different but bizarre.
At some point, did you, in your well, let me ask this. Did you continue as the case agent?
I did.
At some point, did you switch and you were no longer the case agent?
Yeah, once I was promoted to sergeant in June of 2020, I was no longer assigned to homicide, and it needed to stay with the homicide detectives as I was going back to patrol. So Detective Duncan took over as case agent for me.
So, and that was based on your promotion?
Yes, ma'am.
And Detective Duncan had been involved from the initial part of the investigation?
He had since the day of the incident.
And prior to you being switched as the case agent, did you learn anything with regard to an insurance policy?
I did on
I'll
July.
object, Your Honor, based upon hearsay.
I'll sustain that.
And Your Honor, I would indicate it's not being offered for the truth of the matter, but for what was done next in the investigation.
Well, I guess the objection's being sustained because it was a question of did he learn anything, and I didn't see a foundation of how he personally would have had that information unless it was revealed through hearsay of another. Was the basis of, I think, the objection and how I ruled.
Let me have just a moment.
Yes.
Detective Moffatt, in your experience as a homicide detective, are finances oftentimes a motive for homicide?
They can be, yes.
And based on that, do you, as part of investigations, do you look into life insurance?
We do.
Did you, in fact, in this case, look into whether or not Charles Vallow had life insurance?
I did.
Did you learn whether or not he did have life insurance on himself?
He did. He had a $1 million policy.
At some point, did you learn who the beneficiary was?
I did.
And who was that?
Well, when I contacted the insurance company, there was some confusion because had been a recent change of who the beneficiary was. So initially they weren't sure. It had been changed from Lori to Kay, Charles' sister, at a point in time a couple months prior to this event. And the legal department was reviewing the forms at the time.
Do you look into whether or not anyone attempts to make a claim shortly after someone's deceased?
Yes.
Did someone attempt to make a claim?
Yeah, and when I contacted the insurance company on
I'll
July...
object, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Overruled. You can continue to answer.
Thank you, sir. On July 17th, I believe it was on or around July 17th, I contacted the insurance company, and Lori had tried to file a claim on that $1 million policy.
Did you learn whether or not that claim was paid out?
I later did, and it was not paid out to Lori.
Just one moment. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blake. Let's see, Mr. Archibald, will you be conducting cross?
Your Honor, I've previously objected to this testimony as in its entirety, so I don't have any questions.
All right, that'll conclude then the testimony of the witness. May the witness be excused or released from any subpoena.
Yes, Your Honor. I would ask that the witness be released.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, thank you for your testimony this morning. You can be released.